My name is Patricia Wood. I'm a member of the Executive Committee at the Robarts Centre for Canadian Studies and a co-coordinator of the Civis Research Cluster on Urban Governance and Citizenship. And so on behalf of the Robarts Centre, I'm pleased to welcome you all to our panel this evening on municipal governance and the future of housing. We begin this evening by acknowledging that the land on which York University sits has been the residence and traditional territory of several First Nations and many Indigenous peoples, including the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee, and we recognize the current treaty holders, the Mississauga of the Credit. The area where Toronto sits and extending around the Great Lakes is also subject to the Dish with One Spoon Covenant and Wampum Belt, an agreement first among Indigenous nations in the region, and now an agreement that obliges all of us here to share and to serve as stewards for the land, taking only what we need and committing ourselves to peaceful relationships with each other. Universities and other researchers have a particular obligation to recognize their colonial pasts and the role of research and teaching in the perpetuation of the racism and genocide of settler colonialism. Knowledge production is always a political act. So as we listen and participate in tonight's panel on housing and the question of municipal governments using the tool of appropriation, we should also be mindful of the fundamental fact that the land in question is the same land whose Indigenous claims we just acknowledged, and that tonight's discussions do not take place on some other separate plane from those grounded political realities. In acknowledging the land, we also acknowledge our obligations to that land and to each other, and we should keep these in mind both this evening and afterwards in our own work and our own lives. Tonight's event was organized in collaboration with the City Institute at York University and the Federation of Metro Tenants Associations. So I will now turn it over to Jessica Parish from the FMTA to make some introductory remarks.
Thank you, Patricia. My name is Jessica Parish, as Patricia mentioned, and I'm on the board of directors of the Federation of Metro Tenants Associations. I just wanted to take a minute and say that even though we're all sort of sheltering in place and sitting in isolated rooms in front of computers, I see about 105 participants are online right now. And so it's great that we're also in another way part of a group of people who care quite a bit about social and affordable housing. So the Federation of Metro Tenants Associations, it was founded in 1974 and is the largest and oldest tenant federation in Canada. And it exists to advocate for the rights of tenants in the city. And we provide a couple of, we provide a number of services, a couple of which I'll just highlight quickly. And one is a tenant hotline. And we also run a series of tenant schools throughout the year, 3 times a year. And it just so happens that our next tenant school will be next week. And so if you want to learn more about that or about the FMTA, please visit torontotenants.org. I also just wanted to say a couple of quick words about the genesis of this panel and its significance. The idea, the catalyst for this panel was a report that was written by an FMTA volunteer who is a speaker on this panel and who you will meet shortly. The report was published by the FMTA in September, and it's entitled Taking Back Our Housing. And that report makes a case for using expropriation, municipal expropriation powers to expand the supply of social and affordable housing in Toronto. And for me, and also I think somewhat to echo some of Patricia's remarks, one of the key takeaways of that report that comes up is that if we're talking about expropriation in the context of housing and home, we are, I think, of necessity always talking about expropriation in two senses that are similar but distinct but related. And the first, of course, is the legal sense of municipalities having the ability to compel the sale of property in order to advance a public policy objective. But the other sense of expropriation is the processes, which are much more general and unfortunately widespread, whereby historically and also in the present, poor people, working people, Indigenous people, racialized people, and others are pushed out of their homes and their communities and pushed off of their traditional lands. So I think that the panel tonight and all the speakers in their various ways are really going to be directing our attention to really fundamental issues of land, property, power, who benefits and who gets to sit at the table and participate in these extremely consequential decisions. So without further ado, I will pass it over to William Jenkins, who is the Interim Director of the City Institute and Associate Professor of History at York University.
Thanks very much for that, Jessica. Hi, everybody. I'm William Jenkins, the Interim Director of the City Institute, and it's a pleasure to be here. We were established as an organised research unit at York in 2006, and we're a community of affiliated university professors, graduate students, senior undergraduates, visiting scholars, postdoctoral fellows, and we all share an interest, of course, in collaborative, interdisciplinary and critical urban research. And despite the realities of COVID-19, we are carrying on with our research as best we can. Like much of the rest of York, we're operating in a virtual capacity, and our researchers are engaged in projects that look at issues of urbanization and gender in the global south, also issues of suburbanization in Canada and other parts of the world, the phenomenon of the smart city, and of course, research on several themes affecting the Toronto region, not least questions of housing and urban governance. And these themes lead me nicely to an introduction of our moderator for this evening. And it's an honor to introduce Joe Mehevc, who is one of our visiting scholars at the City Institute and whose visiting professorship at York is divided between geography and social science. And prior to his arrival at York, Joe was the city councillor for the City of York and the City of Toronto for 27 years. He has served as Deputy Mayor of the City of York, Chair of the Board of Health, Chair of the Community Development Committee, Chair of the Task Force on Access and Equity, Vice Chair of the TTC, and Vice Chair of the Budget Committee, amongst other positions. He has extensive knowledge and expertise in municipal governments and governance and public policy, public health, community development, community engagement, housing policy, economic development, urban planning and redevelopment, sustainability, poverty reduction, transit planning, and newcomer resettlement. Joe also holds a PhD in theology and social ethics and has decades of experience also teaching at the university level. So it's a pleasure to have you with us, Joe.
Thank you very much, William, for the kind introduction. Yes, my name is Joe Mehevc, and I am very proud visiting professor at York University, and I'll be acting as facilitator moderator for tonight's panel. Let me just say this at the beginning. I believe that good thinking, smart thinking can make a very important contribution to social change work. We have a very distinguished panel before us, and I'd like to introduce them now. We have the wonderful councillor from Toronto, Kristen Wong-Tam, who was elected to Toronto City Council in 2010 and has an extensive career investing in the city through both the public and private sectors. Her contributions have led to the development and support of improved social planning programs, new affordable housing, innovative economic and development programs, community art projects, and investments in diverse family-friendly neighborhood planning. Kristen has led efforts to defend the rights of tenants to obtain affordable and decent standards of rental housing and has helped to create a neighborhood association to preserve and protect the heritage and historical landscapes in Toronto Centre. Do you want to wave, Councillor Wong-Tam? I'll call you Kristen. Thank you, welcome. Secondly, we have another city councillor from our neighbor big city to the north and east, and that's Craig Sauvé. He is a city councillor for the district of Saint Henri, Little Burgundy, Point Saint Charles, Griffintown in Montreal's Sud-West borough, and is an associate member of Montreal's Executive Committee for Housing. He was first elected in November 2013 in the municipal elections of Montreal, following several years of local progressive political activism on the municipal scene. Craig is also the vice president of the board of Montreal's Public Transit Corporation, La Société de Transport de Montréal. He has previously worked in federal politics as parliamentary assistant to an opposition MP for Industry, Science, and Technology. Craig holds a bachelor's degree in liberal arts from Concordia University. Give the crowd a big wave. There we go. Next, we have Cheryl Case. She practices a human rights approach to community planning. As founder and principal urban planner of CP Planning, Cheryl coordinates with charities, private sector industries, and communities to resource the systems necessary to secure a dignified living for all peoples. Through this role, she supports tenant organizing and is exploring the development of innovative models for affordable housing construction. Cheryl was a member of the City of Toronto's Expert External Advisory Committee for the 2020 to 2030 Affordable Housing Plan. Give us a wave, Cheryl. There she is. Next, we have Martine Auguste. She is an assistant professor in the University of Waterloo School of Planning. Her research focuses on housing and social inequity. Can you give us a wave, Martine? Welcome. And lastly, we have Grayson Alabiso Cahill. He is a JD candidate at the University of Toronto. He is the author of Taking Back Our Housing, the report on expropriation and the right to housing. Grayson is excited to put his legal education to use in support of the labor movement, and he currently sits on the steering committee of the University of Toronto's Law Union. That, folks, is our panel, and we'll get right to it. The way we've organized it is around 4 questions, and different panelists will spend a little time focused on each of the questions.